Hi, I'm Simon and welcome to vlog number 39. And today I'm going to be responding to comments that were made on the last few videos that I put out. Also saying a few thank yous to people and new subscribers. And then I'll be spending most of this video talking about new hardware and technology that is coming our way in the very near future or not too far down the road. Then I'll end by talking about some video ideas that I've got for the next month to 2 months for this channel. So let's begin with thank yous. Obviously, thank you to everyone who watched the last few videos that I put out, and even more thanks to those of you that commented. There were some really nice things that people had said and some encouraging support, which is always great to hear. But I'd also like to say thanks to the new subscribers who have joined this channel. It's a very small audience and it's always nice to have new people subscribing, and I think looking recently there's been maybe one subscriber every couple of weeks, so it's a slow build, but tends to be when I put out videos more frequently, then people find them through YouTube and I pick up the odd subscriber here and there. So thank you to any of you who've joined recently. Now, the one video I'd like to spend a bit of time responding to was my response to Lawn Boy's post 1975. Hello Dave, if you're watching. And the comments that people have made on there, which were very nice. A lot of people said you look very comfortable, you don't look awkward in front of the camera. And I guess that's true most of the time, or at least more recently. When I look back at some of my first videos, looking comfortable was not something that, well, I certainly didn't feel it, and it certainly didn't appear that way. But as I mentioned in the comments to some of you, I make a lot of, I don't make a lot of videos, but I produce a lot of footage which never makes it up onto YouTube. And so the stuff that I put out looks a lot better than that which doesn't make it onto YouTube. So I'll give you an example. I made this video 3 times yesterday. Yes, this is the 4th time of making this. One of those I scrapped, the middle time, because I got about 40 minutes into the video and kind of lost my mojo, and I just clammed up and that's it, delete it. But the first time I made the video, I filmed for over an hour, and I promise this one is not that long, as you can see from the video time on YouTube. You know better than I do, but I've cut some things that I talked about in that video that I'm not going to talk about today. But I recorded for an hour and 10 minutes, and the unfortunate thing with this camera, the Lumix G7, and I think a lot of DSLRs and mirrorless cameras, is they have recording limits, and it's 30 minutes on this one. So I recorded the first 30 minutes, and at the same time I record onto my lapel mic. Okay, so you know, that's definitely produces much better sound than the microphones in this camera. And then I recorded the next 30 minutes and also recorded on the Tascam DR05, the little recorder thing that I use that I keep in my pocket here that's connected to the lapel mic. Actually, I better check that I'm recording this. Yes, I am, thankfully. But then when it came to the 3rd segment, I recorded the video, but I'd forgotten to press record. So I had 10 minutes of me waffling on that I couldn't really cut out of the video. So I scrapped it. And by the time it came to making the 2nd attempt, I thought, well, you know, I've rehearsed. It will be much easier the 2nd time around. It wasn't. And then the 3rd time I recorded it, I got to the end of it and I felt really good because I thought I came across really well. I made the points that I wanted to make. I talked for about an hour, put it into DaVinci Resolve, straight away noticed it was all out of focus. The first two videos I made were perfectly in focus. Something must have happened. I must have accidentally hit the shutter button or something. I thought the camera was set to manual, but I guess it isn't. And it was out of focus. It was focusing on the background. So I had to scrap all of that video, and then I just gave up. And here I am again today, fourth attempt at this video. So hopefully this is the one that, well, obviously it's the one that you're watching, because if it isn't, you wouldn't see this. So anyway, so yeah, I regularly have problems with the videos that I make. I feel awkward in front of the camera. I feel kind of awkward right now because I'm not speaking to a real person. There's nothing responding to me. It's a dead, inanimate object. I mean, I know you're seeing this. I'm not referring to you. I'm talking to the camera, the Lumix G7 that I'm staring down the lens of right now. So yeah, I definitely feel more uncomfortable speaking to this camera, even after all of these years of putting videos up on YouTube, than I do if I was speaking to a person or even a group of people. I think I feel most comfortable when I'm talking to a group. I suppose it's just because I've taught English overseas for so many years, and you're used to having a classroom full of people, and I feel pretty comfortable there, whereas this is just kind of weird, but I still enjoy it. If I didn't, I wouldn't be putting videos up on YouTube. It would be a bit of a big stumbling block. But anyway, yeah, I just wanted to kind of respond a little bit to the comments that you'd said about that. But again, thanks very much for everything that you said, and some of the feedback that you gave me as well. That's always really appreciated. Anything I can do to make these videos better, I'm interested in hearing. Another video I'd like to talk a little bit about was the Oculus Quest review that I did. And I honestly think it wasn't as good as I feel it should have been, considering within the world of VR the importance of that product. I think I should have put a bit more effort into the video. I kind of winged it, and as at least one person had pointed out, I hadn't done a good job of focusing the camera. I'm kind of getting used to setting the focus manually for this camera, and I'd blown the focus a little bit, and the background was more in focus than what was on the desk in front of me. So that's not a very good way to shoot. I do have another camera. I've got a Canon which has got really nice continuous autofocus, but it doesn't shoot in 4K, and I don't like the image that comes out of it as good as the combination of this G7 in 4K with the Leica 25mm or Leica Panasonic 25mm lens. And also I think the way, there were some definitely points that I missed in that video, things I wanted to say. I should have included a bit more video footage. One of the problems with that is two of the things that I recorded on the headset, the Star Wars Vader Immortal, and I think it was the boxing game, the demo of Creed. The Vader one didn't record at all, and then the Creed demo recorded really badly. It was kind of jittery, so I couldn't put that video. I was too lazy. I should have gone back and recorded some footage for that. So I apologise for those of you that were really interested in seeing a good video about the Oculus Quest, but hundreds of other YouTubers had made really good videos about it, so it's not like the information's not out there. As for the Quest, I've used it a bit more since the video, but I haven't used it a great deal because I've got the Vive and the Vive Pro, and I've got the wireless adapter for those. There's nothing really that the Quest offers that those don't. And there are just far more games to play on the Steam VR system. But having said that, I'm not disappointed with the purchase of the Quest, because for me I wanted to be able to show VR to friends and family. That's why I bought it. I'm a bit of a VR evangelist, and I want more people to try it, see what's great about it, and that system allows me to show it around. And I've showed a few people and they've been impressed. I'm visiting family again soon, and I'm going to get my parents to try it out. They're both in their early 70s. In fact, it's my mum's 70th birthday today. Oh no, sorry, it was my mum's 70th birthday yesterday when I recorded the first time, because I remember saying it's my mum's birthday, but no, that was yesterday. So I'm going to be celebrating with her at the weekend, and I'll get her to try out VR. That'd be quite funny. I don't think she'll let me put her response to it up on YouTube. I don't want to embarrass her, but I'll be interested to see how she and my dad and other people in my family respond to this technology. And in fact, this is a nice segue into one of the first main things that I'd like to talk about today, and that is new VR technology. And obviously the Quest, I think, is on the mobile side, is an important step for adoption of this technology. I think a lot of people, this is going to be their first proper contact with virtual reality. But also, at the same time, Oculus released their Rift S, which is kind of, in some respects, an upgrade to the Oculus Rift system that they released about 3 years ago now. It's much easier to set up and use, but then the tracking, I think, is not quite as good as what's on there. It's got a better higher resolution display. So there are trade-offs and compromises, but I think all in all, Facebook and Oculus have got a good platform, and they certainly know how to build, like the build quality of their products is good. The ergonomics is really nice. I mean, unfortunately, I think with the Quest, the weight of it is a little bit too much. It doesn't balance as well as some of the other headsets, and as I showed in my review, that I quite often have marks, like if you've been wearing ski goggles for hours and you take them off and you've got marks on your face. It's like that, but only after about 10 or 20 minutes you can end up with marks on your face. So it's not the sort of thing, and this, I have done this, it's a little bit embarrassing. Having used it, someone knocks at the front door and you run down to open it, and well, the time it happened, the postman didn't question me, but he looked at me very strangely, thinking, what the hell have you been doing? I mean, maybe he figured it was VR, or maybe he figured I've got some weird fetish. I don't know. I don't care. But yeah, you do have the potential for looking stupid, not just when you're wearing it, which you always do with virtual reality headsets, but looking stupid for 10 to 20 minutes after you take it off. So the Oculus platform is looking pretty strong, but what's really exciting is more of the high-end stuff that's coming to consumers, and Valve have finally brought out some hardware, or we've got it for pre-order. It's coming out at the end of June, end of this month, so only 2 more weeks to wait until those that have pre-ordered the headset and controllers can get their hands on the Valve Index. And they've taken a bit of a different approach to Oculus, who I think are trying to get as many people into VR as possible. Whereas when it comes to Valve, they've decided we want to go to the enthusiast level and give people the best experience we can for around about the $1,000 price point, which, if you're buying the complete set, is what it would cost. And by all accounts, I haven't tried it, but everything I've read and everything I've seen online suggests that it is a fantastic piece of kit. And you may assume that I have pre-ordered one myself, but the case is not. that, or that is not the case. Because there is one thing it doesn't have that I'm not prepared to give up, and that is wireless connectivity. I have had my wireless adapter for about 6 months. Yeah, about 6 months now. Since coming back to the UK, I bought it almost as soon as I got back. So since the middle of December last year. And it's just being freed of that tether is something I'm not prepared to give up. I can live with the lower resolution. I can live with the lower frame rates. I can live with the slightly worse ergonomics and sound quality that's not quite as good, but I'm not prepared to say goodbye to wireless. So maybe at some point in the not too distant future, Valve will either release their own wireless adapter, or someone will find a way to hack or modify the Vive wireless adapter to make it work with the Valve Index. I'm sure that will happen fairly soon, but I wasn't prepared to take the punt on this new system because it was about £460 just for the headset. I've already got the base stations set up in here that are compatible with it. So I didn't need to buy those. But what I have done is I've bought the controllers, and they're not cheap for a pair of VR controllers. They're about the same price as the Vive Wands if you want to buy a separate set of those. I think I paid about £260 for the Index controllers, but for me, that's going to be good value for money, because to be able to have controllers that strap to your hands and have total finger tracking and are ergonomically suitable for when you're playing shooting games, which is the majority of stuff that I do in VR. Things like Onward, Pavlov, hot dogs, horseshoes and hand grenades. And I'm really looking forward to a title called Boneworks that's from a team called Stress Level Zero, who made Hover Junkers and Duck Season. It's a VR gun sandbox that they've created, and I don't know too much about it because they've kind of kept a lot of the story under wraps, but it looks absolutely amazing from everything I've seen so far. I will link to a video. Anybody who likes shooter games, first-person shooters on the PC, or anybody who likes VR shooters, I think would be really interested in this. I've got a feeling that it's good enough to compel FPS fans on the PC to, well, to not to upgrade their PC necessarily, but to, because I guess if you're a PC gamer, you've probably got a good enough PC for running VR anyway, but to buy a VR headset, it looks that good. So really excited to get the controllers. As soon as I've got them and I've tested them, I'll definitely be making some videos about those. Beyond that, or kind of a sidestep to that, is another system that's being put out by HP. I think it's already out for pre-orders. I think some people have got their hands on it already, and it's called the HP Reverb, and this is a second generation Windows mixed reality headset. And with that, the real advantage is it has an even higher resolution display than either the Vive Pro or the new Valve Index. It's actually got, I believe, 2K by 2K panels per eye, which I think is about a 30 to 40% increase in resolution. And from what I've read and seen on the internet, it's a noticeable difference in visual clarity. Unfortunately, it comes with the same poor quality Windows mixed reality controllers. So this headset will most likely appeal to those who are really into simulation games. So those that like things like Elite Dangerous, what else? Project Cars 2, flight simulator games, anything like that in VR where you've got a cockpit, you need to read dials and clarity of image is really important. I think that headset is going to sell to that market quite well. It's £600 or $600 for the headset, and I think that will sell fairly well to that segment of the VR market. So yeah, what else is there? Well, not just VR news that's piqued my interest recently, but console news. We've heard for a while now rumours about the next generation PlayStation and Xbox, but in the last few weeks we've had quite a bit of confirmation from first Sony and now at the E3 conference from Microsoft about their next generation systems. Not 100% sure that the next PlayStation is going to be called the PlayStation 5. I'll be very surprised if it isn't, but we've got a code name for Microsoft's Xbox, and that is Project Scarlet. And the thing that didn't really come as much of a surprise, especially considering the architecture of the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, is that the next generation consoles are also going to be almost identical to each other. A lot of the hardware that they've talked about so far is that it's going to be based on a Radeon, the Ryzen or Zen 2 architecture CPU from AMD with their Navi GPUs, which they've just released information about recently. So I think it's going to be a combined SoC or system on a chip, or do they also call them APUs, where you've got the CPU and the GPU in the same die, which I think cuts down on cost but also makes it easier for cooling as well. So they're both running pretty much the same platform. There may well be some differences in clock speeds. We might, like we did with the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, see a difference in the amount of RAM or maybe the speed of the RAM. They're also both talking about having very fast SSDs to all but eliminate loading times. And I think for me, that's the most exciting thing about the next generation, especially for when it comes to VR. I mean, I know Microsoft are not really talking about that at all, but with PlayStation, they've guaranteed that the PlayStation 5 or whatever it is going to be compatible with PlayStation VR. I'm pretty sure they'll be putting out a second generation PSVR headset at some point in the future, hopefully with a much better tracking system, and wireless would be, that would be amazing. I think they really need to shoot for that, considering that it's in the living room. Having cables dragged across the floor is not a very suitable setup. You can kind of get away with it when you've got a dedicated gaming room or a study where you're just one person in there playing the VR games, but I think for a living room it really needs to be wireless for the next setup. And the point I was trying to make there is that having either no loading time or no noticeable loading time or very minimal loading time is really going to help, because one of the things I've noticed on the PC is that when I've got games loaded onto my mechanical hard drive rather than the SSD, they take a fair amount longer to load, and it can be really boring sat in the, what would you call it, the construct, maybe, if it were like the Matrix, just the Steam VR loading area. It's so dull. I don't know why, but it's more dull than waiting for something to load on your PC or on your PlayStation 4 when you're sitting at your computer or your PlayStation. So that's a real tangible generational improvement, and I think that's something that I'm very interested in when it comes to the next generation. Another element is the increased power of the CPU. Now, we heard from Microsoft that the Xbox, the next Xbox, maybe what will they call it, Xbox 2, but at the moment they're just calling it Project Scarlet, which is reminiscent of, remember when they released or announced the Xbox One X, and they were calling it Project Scorpio. I think with this next generation, they're not really going to be able to rely on purely wowing people by the graphics. I think the graphical improvement from this generation to the next is not going to be as noticeable as it has been. It's historically seems to have been that way. When you think about going from 8-bit to 16-bit systems, there was a massive jump in visual quality. It really blew people away. Or jumping from 2D sprites to the first 3D systems like the PlayStation. That was a big jump. But, you know, going from PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3, yeah, that was a nice improvement. But from PlayStation 3 to PlayStation 4, I wasn't really that impressed, and I think going from PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5 is going to be even less of a jump. I mean, I know they're talking about hardware or hardware supported ray tracing, but yeah, when you pay attention to what's going on in the PC space with the top end graphics cards and how much of a performance hit it takes for them to have ray tracing enabled, I just can't see Microsoft's touted 4 times improvement in power. Because thinking about, if we go by the teraflops statistic that they often tout for graphical compute performance, the Xbox One X is about 6 teraflops. So I can't see us going from that to 24 teraflops within the space of a year and a half, when the current fastest consumer graphics cards, and we're talking like the RTX 2080 Ti, which costs about $1,000 or £1,000. I think the cheapest one I've seen at the moment, because it is something I'm considering purchasing, is about £960. So it's a crazy amount of money, and I can't see that we're going to get more than that graphical performance within a year and a half at a price point that makes sense for a console, even if they decide to launch at £600, which I think is going to be a tough sell. But I mean, a tough sell for the majority of people if they're trying to go for the same sort of install base as the PlayStation 4. I mean, I know Microsoft have done fairly well with the Xbox One X, and by all accounts, it's a great piece of technology, but that's I think a $500 console. So if they're going to come in at $600, I just can't see how they could get really advanced graphical capabilities. I can see 12 teraflops. I can see a performance increase of that at the absolute outside. But I think it's the CPU performance where we're really going to see a massive difference. Because I think even back when the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One were released, the CPUs in there, which are very similar between the two systems, were quite underwhelming at the time. They were focusing more on the graphics. This time, because there's been such an improvement from AMD in their CPU line, their Ryzen CPUs, I think we're going to see a big improvement in the level of simulation, of the complexity of the open worlds that they can create. And I think initially that's going to be a harder sell than just showing people pretty pictures, but that's what the two companies are going to have to do if they really want people to come on board at launch with these systems and pay the premium prices that they will be when they're first released to the public. But I'm really excited about the next generation. I know it's going to be holiday 2020 is what Microsoft are penciling in as their window for the launch of this thing. So I'm guessing maybe November, end of November, beginning of December, something like that. And I'm sure Sony will launch around the same sort of time. I can't see them coming in with the same sort of architecture and bringing it out months before. I just don't think AMD will be ready for that. But who knows? You know, I don't have an inside source with these things. But one of the reasons, and I talked a lot about this in the other attempts of this video, and I'm not going to talk about the games that I've been playing, but one of the reasons I am excited is because I've really enjoyed playing the PlayStation 4 a lot recently, because my wife was away teaching teachers in Abu Dhabi. She was she was co-teaching on a training course out there, and so I had the run of the living room for the whole month, which meant I could put my PlayStation downstairs and play on the 65-inch Samsung TV again, because we'd come to an arrangement as if I've got this games room, I don't need to be playing games in the living room, so that's kind of her space down there. I mean, we do have an Xbox One in the living room, but that's more for watching Blu-rays or UHD Blu-rays and things like that. So I got a chance to play some games, and I've been really enjoying the console experience. And it's just got me in the mood for the next PlayStation. I don't think I'll be buying an Xbox. I can't imagine there's much coming from Microsoft. In fact, I'm sure there won't be anything coming from Microsoft that I can't play on my PC. So I'm 99% sure the next console I'll get will be a PlayStation 5, whatever they call it. And if it's fully backwards compatible with all of my PlayStation 4 library, I'll buy it on day one, I'm quite sure. If it's backwards compatible with all of my PlayStation collection, which I'm really hoping it will be, I will definitely buy, I will pre-order it if that's the case, because I really want one box that plays all of them. But yeah, the next gen systems, I'm getting quite excited about it. I know it's a long way off, but until then, I've got PC gaming to be doing, and that kind of nicely segues into the last hardware thing that I really want to talk about, and that is the new stuff that's coming out in the next few weeks to months on the PC side of things, because I've had my PC for about 3 years now. I primarily bought it for playing VR, and it's a VR capable machine. It was above the minimum spec when I bought it. I'm running an Intel i5 6600K with a GeForce GTX 1070, which wasn't really what I wanted to buy at the time. I wanted to get the i7 6700K and the GTX 1080, but that would have been another £100 on the CPU price and another £200 on the graphics card price. So I decided to save a bit of money there. At the time, it felt like the right decision, but now it doesn't, because I think the way that VR games have improved, and especially with the higher resolution headsets, and especially with having wireless and needing the CPU to be able to encode the video to be sent to the wireless adapter, I definitely would have benefited from the i7 with its hyper-threading and faster clock speeds, and that bit of graphical headroom to be able to super sample the images a bit higher. Would have been nice to have the GTX 1080. But this time around, I've got a bit of a different scenario. As I mentioned in a previous video, I'm moving away from the Mac. Now, you might have seen recently there's been a lot of news about Apple's new Mac Pro, and I was for a short time considering that my next PC was going to be a Mac Pro. You can see behind me there I've got the trash can Mac Pro, and it's a much derided system, but I really love it. Apart from the fact that it's not really upgradable, and it has far too many Thunderbolt ports compared to USB ports, and the SSD drive at 256 gigabytes is woefully too small. But I just love the design of the system. It's so minimalist. but I can't justify keeping it because I've got a good enough system on my PC. In fact, for editing, it's actually better on the PC. I've decided to switch over to DaVinci Resolve, and that's going on eBay because I can still get £500 or more for it. So I can't justify a £500 paperweight on my desk. No matter how much I like the thing, it's going to have to be sold, and that can offset the cost of some of the new components that I'm going to have to get, because I need to beef up my PC, because I've got a video project coming in the near future that is very, very high resolution. I'm not going to talk about it now because it's not for YouTube, it's something else that I'm doing. And I need a very, very capable system to edit it. Also, there are going to be some improvements coming to this channel on the hardware side. In fact, I'll talk about that first. As I mentioned earlier, I'm using the Panasonic Lumix G7, which I haven't had a lot of love. It's been a more of a hate than a love relationship with this camera, but I do like the image that comes from it. And I'm going to stick with the Micro Four Thirds lens system because I want to get, and well, I have already pre-ordered because there's a long waiting time for it, for the, let's get this right, it's a long name, the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. What an awful name, but that little system, and it was quite an easy choice to make for me because I've got DaVinci Resolve. I'm using DaVinci Resolve 15 at the moment, and I want to be using DaVinci Resolve 16, but for this project that I want to do in the near future, I need some of the tools that are part of the full studio version of that, which costs £240. So rather than paying that and then buying a different camera, if I buy the Blackmagic camera, I get that software included, and it's about £1,100. And at that price point, for just pure video work, nothing can touch it from everything that I've read and seen online. So I'm very excited to be getting my hands on that. It will allow me to shoot 4K at 60 frames a second if I want to. I'll probably continue shooting at 4K 24 or 25, whatever I'm shooting at the moment. But it also allows me to shoot in RAW. Blackmagic have got a new RAW codec, which means you can play around with the contrast and lighting, and it color grades a lot better in post. And I want to learn more about that side of video production. So I'm very excited to be getting my hands on that. So I need a slightly more capable PC to handle that. But then there's this other project coming up which is going to require me to be able to handle 8K files, and so I was thinking of building a Threadripper system, but AMD have got their new Ryzen 3000 chips coming out on the 7th of July, and there's a new platform, motherboard platform called the X570 coming out with it. And by all accounts, it's an amazing system. And from what I've watched in videos, one of the key indicators of this is how many motherboards are being released by motherboard manufacturers. They've putting all of their best stuff into this X570 platform. So rather than jumping on board with a middle of the range Threadripper system at the moment, what I'm going to do is go for the, probably going to get the MSI Meg Creation motherboard, which is an expensive motherboard, but it's laden with lots and lots of input, and it has room for 3 M.2 SSD drives. So I really want a system where I can very quickly get my video footage onto it and scrub through it and edit it really easily without much of a hitch. So it's going to be brilliant for that. The processor I'll be getting is a 12 core, 24 thread part called the 3900X. So that will give me close to the Intel 9900K performance within gaming, and then it will have extra headroom in there for creative projects as well, because it has a few more cores and they are running at a fairly high clock speed. So altogether it sounds like it's going to be a really good system. I got my fingers crossed it really is. And then on the graphical end of things, I'm not quite sure. I have been tempted by Radeon's, the Radeon 7 that's got 16 gigabytes of HBM2 memory, because of course for video editing, when you're using large files, that extra memory is useful, but then it gets very hot and the fan noise is really loud apparently. So I'm not quite sure, because if I want to really step up to the next level beyond that, as I said, with the I'm considering getting a not GTX, RTX 2080 Ti, like the bottom tier one of those, an MSI Ventus card. But that only comes with 11 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory, which is not as much and it's not as fast. And you know, I'm not entirely sure at this current point in time how much that's going to affect video editing performance. So I've got to do a bit more research into that. So it's likely going to be one of those. Another thing that's holding me back from making the GPU choice is that NVIDIA have teased something about super. That's all they've teased, and I think a lot of people have speculated that there's going to be a slight refresh of the RTX cards that are going to come out with slightly higher clock speed, slightly faster RAM. So maybe if there's a version of the RTX 2080 that's clocked a bit closer to the 2080 Ti, but at a couple of £100 cheaper, then maybe I'll go for that. I'm not sure. I'm very certain on the CPU and motherboard that I'm going to get, but not so sure about the GPU. But aside from all of the content work and the video creation stuff that it will make a hell of a lot easier, it's going to be much better for gaming as well. I'm going to be able to play VR games at a super sampling at a higher rate. They'll look even better, and then the sort of standard games I'll easily be able to get very high frame rates. But there is a slight problem with that, is that the monitor behind me isn't really good enough. When I bought it, I never intended it to be a long-term purchase, because I think it was about £300, and it just seemed to fit the best bang for buck as far as monitors go, because it's a 32-inch monitor, it's 1440p, it's only 75 hertz unfortunately, and the color reproduction on it is pretty good as compared to the TN panel that I had on my gaming monitor. The last one that I had when I was living in Sharjah was a 1080p monitor, 144 hertz with a TN panel. I always hated the color, the look of the colors on it, but I miss the faster, smoother frame rate. So I'll be looking to upgrade the monitor as well. But that's another thing that I'm not sure about with the graphics cards, because if I'm going for a higher resolution and faster monitor, HDMI 2.1 is probably what I'm going to need, because I think if I upgrade, I'll want an ultra wide, and if I want an ultra wide, I'll want it to be higher than 4K resolution. And I know there are currently some 5K ultra wides out there, but then they only run at 60 hertz. So I've got a good feeling that once HDMI 2.1 has become standard on monitors and on graphics cards, we'll be looking at very high resolution displays at very high frame rates, because it can apparently run 8K up to 120 hertz, which would be like pushing it to its absolute limits. And obviously there's nothing at the moment that can drive that, but yeah, it would be very cool to have the best of all worlds when it comes to monitors. But yeah, I don't know, maybe in the meantime I'll have to go for something different, a high refresh 1440p, or there are high refresh 4K monitors. Maybe I'll have to stick with the 16:9 aspect ratio. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm very excited to be upgrading my PC. I mean, it's not a bad system, and it's served me really well, but some tests I've done on it with video editing of really big files, it's pretty much unusable. So it's being upgraded for a kind of a work reason, but it's going to benefit me. And probably for content I'll be putting out on this channel about gaming, because I'd like to do some reviews of gaming at 4K and what the differences are with that, because everything seems to be heading in that direction. I mean, they're even talking about 8K gaming on the new systems, which I mean, they might be able to render at 4K and upscale to 8K, which will be quite plausible to do that, but I don't know that. I mean, it wouldn't be impossible to run games at 8K, but they would have to be very, very simplistic games to run at that resolution, and probably running at 30 frames a second. But yeah, there's a lot of cool hardware and technology just around the corner for all of us if we care to spend our hard-earned cash on it. So that's pretty much everything I have to talk about as far as hardware is concerned. I'll just end the video by telling you a few ideas I've got for videos I'm going to put out in the near future. Now, I'm going to apologise first about having not made Gamer's Living Room episode 7. It just doesn't feel comfortable trying to film it in the small living room we've got here. The lens on this camera is not wide enough to be able to set the camera up anywhere in the room and get the framing that I would want. I do have a cheap zoom lens, the kit lens that came with the camera, but it's not a very fast lens, and the quality of the image is pretty poor. So what I think I'm going to do is just have to leave the dreams of making Gamer's Living Room for now until later in the year, when, fingers crossed, I'm going to be living in a new place which will have a larger living room and comfortably allow me to film using this setup and get the shots that I want, and hopefully with a much better camera as well. But aside from that, there are plans that I've got for videos coming up. I'm going to try and do some more reviews, and I'll be reviewing as I get this new technology in, like the Vive controllers, the index controllers that I talked about, not the Vive controller. I mean, I'll be using them with the Vive, but they're called the index controllers, and the new PC hardware. I'll be making some videos about those, but that'll probably be end of July sometime at the earliest. But I'd also like to make a couple of small tip videos as well, because a couple of things I stumbled across that I'd been looking for on the internet and had found by other people telling me them when commenting on other videos. So one of them was about the settings on the M.2 drive I've got in my PC. I wasn't getting the full speed out of it, and I didn't realise. And the Vive wireless setup that I've got, especially when running with the Vive Pro, it was crippling my system. And if I wanted to record and use wireless at the same time, it was just unusable. And I found some settings that I could tweak within Windows that actually make that better and make it work. So I'll be putting a video up about that. Also VR related, I'm going to be talking about why I'm downgrading essentially from my Vive Pro back to the original Vive. So I think there's a worthwhile video to be made of that. Then I've got some plans for a couple of videos that are not VR videos per se, but about things that I'd like to have in VR. The first of those being places I would love to visit in VR. So I'm going to go like a top 10 video. 10 places I'd love to visit in VR. So I'm thinking not real world places, but places from books, movies, TV shows, games, things like that. And then secondly, I'd really like to make a video about games or game series that I would love to have ported into VR. As I don't know about you guys, but I expected that by now all of the AAA franchises would have at the very least had a VR add-on, maybe some additional DLC to enable a VR mode within their games, or complete VR versions of their games, and it just hasn't happened. I mean, it's obvious why VR hasn't been adopted to the same sort of scale that we were expecting, or at least some people were expecting and I was hoping. But so it would be nice for me to make a video kind of talking about my wishes for stuff to be played in VR. And then I was thinking about maybe doing a room tour in here. It's not a particularly impressive games room, but I like watching other people's game room tours, even if they've got quite a small room. It's nice to see what their collection is and how they store it. And so I thought, yeah, maybe something like that would be interesting, but that will be maybe coming in August when I get round to doing that one. So, as always, I really look forward to hearing your comments, or hearing them. Well, if you make a video response, that would be brilliant. Or reading your comments and responding to them and having a bit of a chat with you guys. So please, anything I've talked about today, let me know what you think. Constructive feedback is always warmly welcomed as well. And that's about it for today. So from my games room to wherever you are, this is, one last thing. I just wanted to say thank you to my nephew for buying me this t-shirt. He knows his uncle is a geek, and it takes one to know one, because he is too. But I thought this was a kind of sweet t-shirt. And yeah, he picked it up when he was living in China. He and his Chinese girlfriend picked this one out for me. So thanks very much. So anyway, time to go. From my games room to wherever you are, this is Simon signing off. Bye-bye.